Hello and welcome everyone to our TestRail Tips and Tricks webinar. My name is Jacob Scott. Throughout this webinar, I'm going to highlight some of the tips, tricks, and underutilized or overlooked features and options throughout the TestRail system. Before we dive in, there's a few things to note. This webinar is planned to last for 60 minutes. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to all registered attendees once it has been processed, usually within 24 hours of the webinar's completion. We'll be keeping all attendees on mute throughout the entire webinar, and I'll be sticking mostly to a live demo, so fingers crossed everything cooperates with us today. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the questions console in the GoToWebinar application, and we've got a couple members of our team that will be helping out. So there are a lot of smaller features that we are going to cover today, but the main areas we're going to focus on will be project types and the different uses for the different types of project we have available, importing test cases and adding test cases into your TestRail system, managing and working in your test runs and plans, navigation and just some general workflow tips, using push templates along with your defect integration, some other useful customization options, and a lot more. So my name is Jacob Scott. I'm a member of the support engineering team with TestRail. I've been with TestRail for over 2.5 years, supporting our users with all manner of problems. And there are quite a few things I've picked up along the way that I'd just like to share back to the TestRail community. So with that all out of the way, let's dive in, and we'll start with projects. All right, so within projects, when creating a new project, you'll be prompted to fill out the name and description, and then you'll be faced with the choice, what project type should you choose? There are 3 project options in TestRail, which determine how your test cases will be organized within the project. So starting from the top, we've got single repository. This is kind of the default selection for new projects, and for good reason. It's the simplest to use and get started in, has fewer restrictions, and users can jump in and start creating their test cases as soon as it's created. So with this project type, all of your test cases will be present in one centralized repository, which then can then be divided up into sections or folders to keep things orderly. The next option is the single repository with baseline support. So I've got a couple different ones here that I'll show off. The baseline project type is designed for teams that do a lot of concurrent testing for slightly different versions of a single product. So this can mean different versions of a product based on the platform. So if I create a like a master suite here, I've got 20 test cases in the master suite. So you would go in, create this master suite, add your test cases, and then you'll go ahead and add a baseline. When you add a baseline, let's just say that since we're doing project specific, we'll do an Android version of our application. And then we can copy from the master baseline here. And what that does is just creates an entirely new suite here or baseline that has all of the same test cases from the master version, but now we can go in and make changes to these specifically. And so since we do have some test cases here that are specific to different platforms, we can go ahead and remove these test cases because they're not applicable to the Android version, and this will not affect the master version. And then if there's any of these test cases where the actual functions are just a little bit different for the Android version, I can go in and make changes to each of those specifically. So that's what's great about the baselines. They just give you the option to essentially create new versions of your test, of your overall test cases for the different platforms or versions that you'll be testing. There's also a number of teams that also prefer to use baselines with different versions. So if you you have your master test suite, that's just the overall everything that you test within your product. But then if you have different versions like a 1.6 and a 1.7 and a 2.0 that you would be developing and testing side by side or concurrently while you're working with them, that this can be helpful since you can add new features to each of these different baselines, which can then be transferred over to the master, or you can remove things that are no longer applicable, or just edit things as needed. Right. So finally, the multiple suites option. So this is going to be a different type of project here. So when TestRail was initially released, this was the only project type available. It's still here, although it is not used as frequently as the other two. The single repository is by far the most common these days. Baseline's also not super popular, but hopefully with a little bit more education out there, people will start giving them a shot. But with test suites, the basic idea of using multiple suites is to provide just another organizational tool within your project to split up your test cases into separate buckets. So multiple suites is a good project type for teams that have extremely large projects with different functional areas that need to be tested individually. So if I go into the functional areas option, so I might have a test suite that's installation and setup, and then other test suites that are based on the different functions that my app performs. So yeah, you'd set up different test suites for different functional areas of your system. So you might have one for your installation and setup, and one for authentication, different authentication methods that might be available to your users, and then another section for just one of your different one of your different functions that you would want to test in the app. But this is, like I said, it's really kind of designed for teams that have very, very big projects. So if you've got a lot of different projects or a lot of different things that need to be tested, you might have different teams working on each of those different sections. Then having this kind of breakdown where everything's a little bit more split up can be really useful. Alternatively, I have seen some teams that also use the multiple suites to go with different test types. So they can have separate suites for automated tests versus manual tests, or functional versus regression tests, or exploratory testing versus kind of more standard manual testing. And they can set that up while maintaining all of their tests within a single project for easier reporting. So while suites can definitely be useful in some cases, please note that there are some limitations. So if you go to create a test run in a suite, you can only choose the test from a single suite. So you would need to just choose one of those in order to create a run. You would not be able to create a full test run that has every single test case in the project. So that's kind of the main limitation there. So any project can be edited later by an administrator to use one of the other project types if necessary. So if I want to go in and edit this, the thing is, it's way easier to go from a single repository to one of the other types than it would be to go from multiple test suites to a single repository, for instance. So let's actually go to just one of the, we'll go to this baselines option here. And then if I wanted to edit this and then make it a single suite, it is going to give me a warning. I'm just saying that I have more than one test suite. So essentially what I would need to do is consolidate all of the test cases throughout all of the different suites or baselines into that master, and then I'd be able to come in here and convert this. Before we do that, we would highly recommend closing all of the test runs so you don't accidentally lose any of the relevant test runs or test results. But we'll get a little bit more into closing runs and the benefits of that in just a little bit here. So let's go back into this project that we're creating. We're just going to create a single repository project for this one. While we're creating this project, there are a couple other things that we want to note. So in the Access tab, the project the project creator can choose exactly who has access to this. So we've got a number of different users in our instance here. If I wanted to, I can set up each of these individual users with very specific access for this project. So if I want to give them each, if I want to give this person lead access, or I want to give, I want to make sure this person doesn't actually have access to this, I can grant them no access. I can also give people read-only access if they're people that should be able to check out everything, but we don't want them to interact with anything in this project. So there's a lot of different options available for you here. You're not limited to these. You can also create your own user roles with custom privileges as needed. This also applies to user groups. I don't have any groups created in this instance currently, but if I did, we would have the ability to just kind of blanket provide privileges within this project to entire groups at a time. The other things that you can take a look at here are the defects and references tab. This allows you to set a totally separate defect integration from the primary one. So in this instance, we do already have a Jira integration configured, which we're going to use to demonstrate a couple things a little bit later. But for right now, just know that you can set up a project-specific integration if necessary. This will overwrite the global integration, but if you have multiple teams that are using different instances of Jira, or one team is using GitHub and the other team is using UTrack, you can configure that individually on a per project basis for those different teams. All right, so now that we've covered the projects, let's go ahead and finish creating this guy, and then we're going to get into some test cases. We are going to use a CSV import, and we are going to use the same group of test cases that we've got in all of our projects here. But the first thing we are going to do is import them from the CSV. So this is the CSV file that I am using. Just wanted to kind of show it off here. Now, what you'll notice in a lot of these is I do have individual rows. Now, each of these rows is a separate step that I will use inside of my test case. So I'm going to be using the test case steps template, and that allows me to set individual steps and expected results within my test case. And then I can, when I'm executing those tests, I can make each step or mark each step pass or fail. So that's really useful when I'm actually going into the execution, when I'm doing, taking a look at, how things performed later. I can see exactly where everything, fell apart within a test, or make sure that every single individual moment in the test is working as expected. So as you can see in the CSV file, each step for the test cases is on its own row. And that is necessary when you are importing it to this template. One thing to note is I am using just kind of dummy text for a lot of these, so you can ignore the contents of these tests. They don't actually mean anything. So now I'm going to go ahead and go back to my system here, and let's go ahead and jump into our newly created project. This is the single repository project. One cool thing is for easy navigation, the projects are always alphabetized inside the system. So it's not in order of when it was created or anything like that. It is just in alphabetical order. But if I do want to put this one on top to make it easier to find later, I can just star it there. I probably worked within this app for 6 to 8 months before I ever realized I could do that, and I have dozens and dozens of projects for my own testing, so it was definitely a happy day when I discovered that. So jumping into the single repository project here, let's go ahead and import our test cases. So we're just going to use the import cases button here, and we're going to use the tips and tricks. All right, we are going to configure new mapping for this one, but I do want to highlight the configuration file stuff, so we'll get to that in a moment here. We are going to just import it to the basic project. We don't have any sections or anything. If we did have different sections in the system already, this import to would give us a dropdown of all of the sections within our instance and allow us to import them specifically to one location. We are going to switch over to the UTF-8, and then we are going to make sure to choose the correct template. We are using the test case steps template. So let's go ahead and move on here. Now for row layout, as I just showed, the test cases do use multiple rows. So we are going to check that box, and then we are going to use the title to detect new cases. Because as within the spreadsheet here, you can see that wherever there's a title, that means there's a new test case, and then each of them have their own separate steps after each of those. So every time it finds a new title, it knows that this is a new test case. All right, now let's go ahead and map the columns in our CSV to the TestRail field. So there are certain columns in here that aren't going to have a counterpart that can be imported to. So while these test cases are going to, they have IDs and the created by and the created on values in the spreadsheet, but we are not actually going to be importing those. The system will automatically give them new IDs. It will automatically give them a new timestamp and excuse me, attribution to the user that's actually doing the import here. But everything that is a actual field within our test cases is going to get added onto these. So actually, we don't want section to go to section. Section hierarchy goes to section. That's a little tip for you here. So in the spreadsheet, so we do have section hierarchy. You can see where I do have a child, like a child section or a subsection in the system. It'll do this authentication and then greater than caret, and then the actual the subsection. So if I use the section hierarchy as the section when I'm doing this import, then it will automatically put single sign-on integration into the authentication section and have these correctly formatted the way I want. If I just do the section, then single sign-on integration would be its own section, be a totally separate thing. So if I do section hierarchy into section, then it is going to work the way that I want it to. Now let's go into expected results and then steps, and then we'll choose the test type. Template, that was already selected. We're choosing the test case steps, and then everything else here is something that we don't necessarily need to worry about for this particular import. So let's go ahead and hit next. This screen, we don't need to worry too much about it. The main thing is just to make sure that your field values that are present inside of the CSV, which is here, match the field values that are present inside of the TestRail system. You can remove HTML tags. We don't actually have any HTML tags in this CSV, so I'm not too worried about that. Let's go ahead and go next. And now we just have a nice little preview here of what our test cases are going to look like. It's going to give me the first, handful. Oops. I accidentally hit back. Let's go ahead and run that import again. Sorry about that, everybody. Should only take me a second. Oh, it looks like everything is, I remembered a lot of stuff, but not everything here. All right, let's go back and do this again so y'all get to really get a good idea of how all of this works, given that we're watching, you get to see it twice here. So that's fun. Let's go ahead and update everything here. Do type, I think that's everything we needed here, right? Yeah, okay. Go ahead and next, everything looks good. Here's our preview, and let's go ahead and import. Now I am gonna download this configuration file. This is a huge time saver for people that are having, if you're migrating from another platform, or you just have a lot of your test cases already defined in spreadsheets and CSVs. This can be a great time saver for people that are doing multiple imports at one time. So if you have a lot of different CSV files that need to be imported into different locations or into different projects, then using these configuration files can be really useful. So I'm going to go ahead and download that. And I'm going to increase the size here a little bit for you guys too. Sorry about that. All right. So now here's all of my test cases. Everything did come in. Looks right here. So that's great. I think I've got 20 total test cases in this instance. Now, just to demonstrate how useful that configuration file can be, I'm going to go ahead and jump into a separate project here. I don't have any test cases in this one, but let's go ahead and import from CSV one more time. This time we are just going to use a configuration file. So let's go ahead and grab that same CSV again. We are going to hit load mapping from configuration file, grab a configuration file, and this should automatically, you see it automatically set it to test case steps. It set it to UTF-8 for me already. It's already got all of my fields mapped over correctly, and everything is set up exactly the way I wanted it to be. Just kind of go through, scan, make sure everything is looking good, but then it automatically brings everything back in for me. So that's super useful. Very happy about that. Cool. So that's everything we've got going on here with the configuration files and test case import. So as you can see, it just takes all the small steps out when you're doing the importing. It's really useful if you have a lot of import files that you need to manage at one time. So let's head back to our original project. We do have our 20 test cases set up and ready to go. We're going to check the first one here just to make sure everything looks good. Yeah, everything looks like it's got all of the necessary fields. We don't have any preconditions defined here, but I'm not too worried about that. Let's go ahead and cancel out of that. So one thing that was not included with our test cases here was any references. So I do have, like I said, I do have a Jira instance set up that we are integrated with. So I'm going to go ahead and, inside of our first test case here, let's go ahead and edit this. I'm going to add a reference to TT2. That's for Tips and Tricks 2. It's one of my Jira projects. We don't actually have an issue at TT2 just yet, but that is going to, actually there might be one already there. Oh, no, okay. So yeah, TT2 currently does not exist, but we do have one at TT1, and we do want to make sure that all of our test cases are linked to that. So first thing I'm going to do here is add a new column for references. This is just a great way for you to view everything all in one location. You can hit either the columns up in the shortcut inside of the section bar, or you can click columns up here to essentially do the same thing. Just if you're scrolled all the way down, this is way more convenient than having to go all the way up and hit columns there. So with our new column set up, we can just kind of quickly sort by the columns, see that there. I do want to select all of these test cases, and now I'm going to do a bulk edit. So I'm going to edit selected, and I do want to add the reference to TT1 to all of my test cases. So now that is going to update all of these test cases to include the TT1 reference. I don't know why there it goes. Okay, it wasn't selecting it for me. Okay, so now here's, it's just going to confirm with me we are changing the references for each of our test cases to TT1 here. So I do want to update all cases. Now, one thing I wanted to mention here is that you'll see that the initial one that I had set up for TT2 is no longer there. So when you do the bulk edit, do be careful because it will replace whatever is already in those fields with whatever value you're choosing. There's not a way to have it append new information to those fields, so just make sure you're being careful with it. But using the bulk editing option is super friendly, super useful for most people. Just do make sure that you're not going to be overwriting any information that you do want to have present in the system. So a couple other quick things to look at while we're talking about test cases. So while on this test case view, you can easily restructure your test cases by dragging and dropping. So if I wanted to move these here, I can move them or I can duplicate them. You can do it with an individual test case, just by grabbing something like that. You can also check your different boxes and grab more than one at a time. You can do it by moving just directly into the location that you'd like in the system, like in between these two test cases, for instance. Or if I wanted to, I can also grab them and drag them all the way over to a different folder. So if I wanted them to go down here, I can do that as well. So there's this is pretty intuitive once you get the hang of it. It may not be the most obvious thing at first, but then once you know where those little grabber bars are, it definitely becomes a bit more easy. All right. Also, when you're inside of a test case, if you want to kind of quickly navigate to the next test case, let's say you're making some changes, you just want to get to the next one without having to go back to the main screen, you can just click this little button here. These just kind of go to the next or previous case inside of the project or suite that you're in. So you can just kind of quickly run through all of your test cases super easily. This also appears when you're inside of a run and can be used when you're executing tests to quickly move on to the next one as well. So going back to our main test case list here, we did touch on moving test cases to new folders within a single location, but what if we need to copy them over to a different project or an entirely new test suite? So to do that, we are going to go into a separate project here. Let's just go ahead and we'll do the functional areas. Actually, no, we'll do the versions of our baselines here. So this is going to be version specific. Let's go ahead and grab one of these. So we do already have some test cases in here. I'm not going to worry too much about it. We're going to essentially just duplicate what's in here. But I'm going to use this copy move cases button. It's the little 2 sheets of paper here. We want to be in the destination when we click that button. So we want to be where we want our test cases to show up. So we're going to be in the spot where we want these test cases to come in. And then we are going to choose the source. You'll see all of our different test suites and projects are listed. We're just going to grab them from our single repository that we've been working in. I'm going to grab all test cases, but if I wanted to, I could just filter by specific values and then move them that way. I am going to also copy and move my sections. I'm not going to append it to anything, but I can add them into a different section if I wanted to, if I wanted these to populate into another location. And I am going to copy these. We don't recommend moving your test cases out of one project and into another. To do so, if your test cases are currently in any active runs, then the tests based on those test cases and any results that have been recorded for those tests will be lost. So you do want to copy your tests most of the time, unless you've got all of your test cases in that original project are closed. If the project is kind of already done, you've closed everything down, there's nothing really too much to worry about, then yeah, you can move your test cases out of there. It shouldn't be a huge problem. But if you are still working actively within that project and those test cases are still in use, then you definitely want to copy them instead of moving them directly. We'll go ahead and do that. And now you can see we've got an entire new set of our test cases inside of this suite here. So that can be really useful. You don't need to do a full export and then re-import back into the system in order to repopulate a new project with your same test cases that already exist in the system. All right. Sorry, making sure I've got everything I need. Okay. All right, let's move on. So like I said, we do generally recommend that you copy your test cases rather than move them, as moving a test case out of a project or suite would remove it from any open runs. Speaking of runs, let's go ahead and set up a new test run in our single repository project here. I'm going to close these other tabs out that we don't need. Right off the bat, when you're creating a new test run. You'll see some options, basic things like title, description. You'll have this kind of automatically populated with the date and just a generic test run thing here. You can also add references now to your test runs. So if I did want to also link this to my Jira issue that all of our test cases are linked to, this is an epic instead of Jira, then I can go ahead and enter that value here, and that will automatically display some of the testing details inside of Jira, and also give me a quick link to look at the reference page that I have in Jira set up for this particular testing effort. So you can reference pretty much anything from your defect tracker. So things like different issues, stories, epics, bugs, sprints, anything like that. You can link your test runs to, so you can really hone in on what it is exactly that this test run is focusing on. There's also an option here for assigning the full test run to an individual user. So generally speaking, if you're planning on assigning out individual tests to different users on your team, you can leave this blank, as each test within the run can be assigned individually. But if the run will be mostly executed by a single user, this is a great option for easily assigning it all to them in one go. So in this case, I'm going to assign them all to myself for now. And below that, there are 3 setup options for the test run. The default is the include all test cases, which unsurprisingly includes all the test cases that are in the project you're in. Or if you're using a baseline or suite project, you would choose what suite or baseline you're using when you're creating a test run. And then that would just use all of the test cases within that suite. Under that, you'll have the option for select specific test cases, which will give you the option to select individual test cases from each section, or you can use the filter option. The filtering here is very robust, can filter against the values of almost any field within TestRail to really easily locate and select the necessary test cases. You can leverage the filtering options with custom fields as well, and that'll help you set up runs based on any number of variables that your team configures directly. We'll demonstrate that a little bit more later. The final option here is dynamic filtering. This is still a relatively new in the TestRail system, and you can see it is still marked as beta while we are working to improve a few aspects of this system. But the overall gist of it is when you set a selection filter, it will automatically add or remove tests from that run if they are added or edited to the project and they meet the criteria. So I'm going to use this option, and we'll set this up with a filter. We're going to use the title contains test case. So this is going to be our filter for this test run. I think about half of our test cases inside of this project, or I think like 7 of them, are going to have a test case in the title here. So we'll go ahead and set selection. You can see which sections it went ahead and started highlighting here. So we do have a handful of tickets here. So we're just going to test all of our functions. We're not testing any of the setup and initial run stuff within this instance. So let's go ahead and change that. We do have 7 test cases included in this filter. So that's pretty useful here. So let's go ahead and add this test run. And you'll see everything is assigned to me here. That's what we want. Now, just to do a quick demonstration, let's go ahead and add a new test case here. We're just going to use the quick add option. Quick add is great, just lets you very quickly add a new test case. You don't actually have to go in and edit anything. It's going to just choose kind of default, whatever the default options are for each of the different fields. You can just kind of very quickly create a new test case. Really useful for just brainstorming. If there's something you're like, oh man, we need to add this in, you can just add it in quickly and then come back a little bit later and edit it to fully flesh it out and add all of the information that you need into it. But for now, we're just going to leave it very basic. The main reason I wanted to show that is that now when I'm viewing this test run, let's go ahead and refresh it. you'll see that test case 8, because it does match our filter that we set up, where the title contains the words test case, it does now appear in this test run. And you even get this handy little icon here letting you know that this test case was added because of the dynamic filtering option that was used to set up this, this particular test run. So another thing to note, if you are using the dynamic filtering and a test case is edited so that it no longer meets the criteria of your filter, it will be removed. So do so with caution. It would also remove any test results that have been associated with that test from that run. So if we added this and said it was passed, and then we changed this title so that it doesn't have the words test case in it, it would be removed from the run, and any results associated with it would also be removed. So we do want to be careful when editing test cases to make sure that we're not going to affect any of the runs that those tests may be in use in. All right, so now that we're back to our test run, let's have a quick vocabulary lesson. We'll talk about entity IDs and searching. Let's start off by comparing the list of test cases in my project to the list of test cases within this run. So if we're looking at the test cases here, you will see that I do have, all of them do have this ID. It's C330. The C here stands for test case. So this prefix is always the entity type. So in this case, it is a test case. And then this is the ID. For test cases, the IDs are static. This ID will never change as long as this test case remains inside of this project. Now over in our test run, you'll see that it's T136. So these do not match what these, the case IDs. These are a little bit different. The T stands for test, and the ID is the specific test ID within this run. So a test case is what we refer to as the reusable entity that you set up in your project that you will be adding to each of your different test runs. The test is the instance of that test case within a run that can have a new result added to it. So it may be a little bit confusing at first, but anytime you hear me talking about test cases, I'm talking about the reusable entity that I create in my projects that I can add to my test runs. And anytime I refer to a just simple test, I'm talking about what I can add a result to inside of a test run or test plan. So using the IDs and knowing what type of entity you're working with is crucial to many of the API methods. So if you are planning on doing any kind of automation, we highly recommend familiarizing yourself with the ID system and using prefixes and how the IDs interact with one another. But then it can also be useful in the UI as well. So for instance, if I wanted to jump directly into a specific test case, let's say I wanted to jump into this one, I can just go into the search bar here and enter C390, since that's the ID of that. And then when I hit enter, it's just going to take me directly to that test case. And this works for just about anything. You know, if I wanted to go to the S3, it's you know, one of my test suites in a different project here. Just clicking that will take me straight to that project, right into that test suite. You know, I can go into different projects using the P. You know, pretty much any of the entities will have their own prefix. So you've got M for milestone, C for test case, T for test, R for run, M for milestone. So there's, you know, all kinds of different prefixes that you can use. Another cool thing with these is you can enter the, you know, it actually gives you a little option here to explain. You can reference other test cases if you put them within brackets. So if I wanted to reference a different test case, I can do, you know, C388. Let's save this test case, and then if I look into my preconditions and I click this, it is just going to take me directly to this other test case with ID C388. So it's a good way to set up references internally to different tests that you would want to be to make sure that are working as expected. So that's a good option for many people as well. All right, so now let's get back to our test run that's ready to go here. I'm going to start off doing a couple quick bulk edits. So I'm just going to grab a couple of these tests, and I am going to, I'm just going to go ahead and add a result. I'm going to assign these to another user. So this is going to go to a different person here. We are just going to mark all of these as passed. And now I'm going to actually use the assign to filter it, and then just grab all of the ones that are assigned to me. And I'm going to mark all of these as blocked. So let's go ahead and add results here. I'm going to keep them set up with me. All right. So just a couple quick notes I kind of skipped over here. When you are adding results, there's a couple different ways that you can navigate adding results here. So if I want to, I can use this 3-pane view. This is really handy for just kind of very quickly looking through everything. Sorry about that. So this is really useful if I just want to kind of scan through all of my existing test cases or tests in this run. So I can go ahead and just kind of quickly mark them. I can add a quick result from here. If I just want to pass a next, move on to the next one, I can do that as well. I can reassign, and most usefully, I think, we can also edit directly from here. This will edit the underlying test case. So if I needed to make a change to my preconditions or add new information from the steps to the underlying test case, I can do that just straight from within the run inside of this 3-pane view. So that's really useful. Let's go ahead and back out here. Another thing that I can do if I go into the test case directly, like I said earlier, you can kind of navigate through these. You'll see right now it is taking me into these ones that I've assigned to my other user, but I can click this clipboard here and change it to where it will only navigate to the tests that are assigned to me. So if I just want to quickly move through all of the tests that are specifically related to me, then I can use this clipboard option and just kind of quickly navigate that way. All right. So now we've got all of our tests already marked here inside of this. So this test run is completed. One other thing I did neglect to mention here, when you are in a test like this, you can also use these breadcrumbs for easy navigation. So if I wanted to go directly to the section that I'm in, I can click that there. I can also just click this to go back to the main test run page. It's not really changing the view for me right now because I don't have very many tests in this test run, but you will go directly to whichever entity you click. If you've got like a lot of different sections that are available in this test run, then that would be a little bit more obvious what's actually happening there. So with this test run complete, I'm going to close the test run. I do that by clicking this lock icon. We do recommend closing all of your test runs once they are fully completed so that no further changes will be made to them. So note that closing a run cannot be undone. So please make sure it is fully complete. No further changes would need to be made in it before you actually close it. But for this one, we are going to close this run. All right. So, make sure they're complete before you close it, like I said. But closing your runs is really important because it prevents any changes to your test cases from affecting the contents of the run. So actions like updating a test case or adding a new custom field won't change the contents of the tests within the run, guaranteeing that when reviewing later on, you'll be able to view the tests as they were run at that precise moment. So since the system doesn't need to update each instance of the test within those database, it does actually speed things up a little bit too, and kind of gives you a little bit more performance, a little bit better performance. So with this run completed, let's just say I need to create a new test run with the same tests, or even just the test that that we blocked the first time around. So here I can use the rerun button, and this is going to create a virtually identical copy of this test run, but it is going to but we can choose which ones to bring forward. In this case, we're just going to bring everything forward, but that's just passed and blocked, so we don't need to worry too much about it. Let's go ahead and grab these guys. You'll see that it is, kind of duplicating everything here. It's keeping the assign to set to me. We do have the dynamic filtering. It is using the same dynamic filter that we had set before. So let's go ahead and add this test run. I'm going to do the same thing real quick. I know we're getting close to time here. I know we had some technical difficulties earlier, so if y'all bear with me just a minute. We don't have too much left to get through. So let's go ahead and edit these, and we're going to reassign these over to our other user here. Let's say I want to make a change to this test run. I want to add something into it. So let's go ahead and edit the test run. So since this is still assigned to me, where it's still set to assign to me, let's add or let's change the filter a little bit. We're going to just also, I don't even know what to change it to, but actually we're going to just change it to include all test cases instead of just being those specific ones. But now when we save test run, it is going to reassign all of the tests that we had back to me. So a number of these were assigned to our second user, but the main reason it did that was because I didn't have, or I had it still selected to assign the entire test run to me. So let's reassign these again. So to get around this, we're gonna reassign a handful of these. Actually, I'll grab a couple more here, just up at the top. So let's assign some of these again. Now, if I go back to edit the test run again, since this is set to assign to, that's what's causing that blanket assignment to happen. I'm going to change this and actually just choose this blank value at the top. And what this is going to do is keep everything just as it is in the system. And so we understand that this may not be super intuitive for all users. So until there is, something that's set up inside of the UI that automatically does that, we can actually fix that with a workaround by implementing a UI script. So let's go ahead and talk about UI scripts a little bit. Let's go ahead and jump to a different tab here, and we're going to go into customizations in our administration panel. And then UI scripts are going to be located at the very bottom here. So I do have a UI script that I've already added in for change test run assignee. So UI scripts are amazing. There are just endless possibilities for what you can do with them in TestRail. They allow users to add their own custom code in the form of CSS, HTML, or JavaScript to add or alter the default appearance, functionality, or behavior of certain aspects of TestRail. So to demonstrate, let's go ahead and activate this UI script that we've got set up. This is just set to automatically, when you go to edit a test run, it'll automatically set the assign to field to the blank value. It won't keep it with whatever it was set to before, just sets it to the blank value. That prevents the issue of accidentally reassigning tests when you're editing a run. So let's go ahead and save this while it's marked as active. And we'll come back into our test run here. Now, if I go to the edit option, you'll see the assign to is just automatically set to blank. It doesn't even pull up the me assignment here. It just automatically goes to blank. So that can be really useful, for instances like this, to implement a workaround. But they can do so much more than that. You can do simple tasks like setting a default field value or hiding certain links or different action buttons in the system. Or you can do much more advanced options like adding a button that kicks off an automated test script on a separate server. You can even use it to automatically add different styling to text based on certain criteria, or you can even completely redesign the entire TestRail instance. So before we had the different themes, like the dark mode inside of TestRail, someone had already done it entirely through UI scripts. So there's tons of stuff you can do with UI scripts. They're very powerful. One quick plug here. We did recently set up a GitHub repository that does contain some different user-submitted scripts of different kinds. So there are some examples of different UI scripts that are present here, including the one that I just used here. And this is a really useful location for anybody that is interested in kind of maybe getting some ideas about what they can do with UI scripts or with other types of scripts. This is a pretty new system for us. So we are still trying to engage the community a little bit more. So if there are any users out there that have set up some custom UI scripts they'd like to share with the community, or not just UI scripts either, if you have some API scripts or automation scripts, your own custom defect plugins, translations, anything of that nature that you would like to share with the overall TestRail community, definitely feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out to us on tickets, on the forums, or even just directly through this GitHub repo. If you submit a pull request with the information you'd like, a member of our team, one of our moderators, will go through and add your tool there. So this can be really useful, really good resource, and we hope to see this grow, in the future, so that more people can have, more access to some of the cool things that people have set up and done within TestRail. All right, so let's head back over to our customizations area. I wanted to touch on a couple of the cool things we can do with custom fields. So when we touched on the baseline projects earlier, we discussed using that project type for setting up different baselines for different platforms or operating systems. But what if your product is not that large and you'd rather keep things simple with a single repository, but you still want to create runs specific to the different platforms that need to be tested? For this, we would set up like a custom multi-select field. So I'm going to really go through this really fast. I know we're running out of time, and I definitely lost a little bit of time to my power outage here. So sorry about that, everybody, but we're going to try to breeze through as many things as we've got left here. So here, you will just put something like, so this is going to be for different platforms. So I'm going to just name this platform. For system name, I'm also going to name it platform. We are going to make this a multi-select field. Now, the main thing I wanted to do here, so we are going to apply it to all templates, but one thing that's cool is you can do different options for different projects. So let's say I had one project where the platforms were going to be just mobile devices. So I have, for my first project, it's just these two mobile devices, and I can choose which project this applies to. So this is going to just go into my single repository, and that just has those two options there. Excuse me. Now I can add a second option here, and this will be for a different project, and this one is available on all platforms. So I've got Android, iOS, and then Mac OS, and then also Windows. And then let's set that up in a different project here. We're going to put it in there. So now let's add that field. So we do have our platform field here. Now inside of each of our different projects, let's go ahead. This is my single repository project. If I edit one of these test cases, now looking at it, I do have this multi-select field here down at the bottom. and it's got both my Android and iOS options. So if I do need to set a filter in the future, if I just have a number of test cases that have Android, I have a number of test cases that have iOS and Android, and then I have a number of test cases that just have iOS. Whenever I set a filter, I'll just set a filter for platform as Android, and it'll grab everything that includes that option. So this is really useful for setting up multiple test runs based on the different criteria, like different platforms or different environments that you want to test in. I did want to also just show the how different it is in the other project that we set this field up for. So if I edit a test case in here, we still have that same platform, but now you'll see it's got all 4 of these different options. So having that, kind of flexibility in what fields show for your different custom fields in what projects can be really useful. All right, so let's keep moving on here. One other thing, I know we don't have really any more time here. There's a couple other things I did want to demonstrate. We were going to discuss using a custom field to kind of do test case reviews. We're not going to get into that. I know we're running out of time, but if you do have like an approval process on your test cases, I do recommend setting up custom fields to manage your way through that. That's usually really helpful. But the last thing I did want to touch on here is setting up a push template. This is for integrating something like Jira. So with Jira here, we do have our Jira instance already connected to our system. Now this option under here for enter a template for the description field of the defect dialog does not give us a lot of information about what that's actually doing. And if I click it, it just creates this new text field and it's just got some random variables in it. This really doesn't tell me too much about what's going on, but what's happening here is when I'm in a project, and let's jump back in here. We'll take our test run. Let's go ahead and add a result to this one. We're going to fail it real quick, and then we're going to push. So it just fills the most basic of information in here. And this information in the description, what it's actually showing is just the test's comment. I didn't actually fill any test comment, so it didn't actually include anything. If I add this is a comment here, and I do the push again, it's just going to show me the comment, and then it shows me the test details. So that's all that's currently in here. This is really cool, though. I can jump in and add a field, choose what field to add. This is a selection of fields from both the test case and the results dialog. So if I want to, add a link to what the run, to the run here, if I wanted to add, an estimate, I can add that in there. I can also add static text. So if I wanted to add kind of a header here, saying like this is the test comment, oops. Oh, okay, that's what's happening there. That's the test comment, this is the test details. I can set all that up like that. I actually have one that I have set up here. So this is, I am using Jira. And one of the cool things is you can use the inline or formatting features for these tools. So if I want to set up a an instance to have all this different information here, I can do that, and it's going to look all pretty. So just to demonstrate really quickly, I know we're out of time completely here, but let's go ahead and do one more push with that saved, and you'll see it looks really nice here. Let's go ahead and submit this. I need to actually fill in some of this information. That's why it's not going. All right, I'll just do this as a task. And let's go ahead and assign it to me and submit. All right, and it saved it as TT2 here. Let's add that result. Now if I click on it here, you'll see in Jira, so I added these nice little headers inside the system. I bolded certain text. Inside my push template, I created the ID as a link that'll link me directly back to that test case. So there's lots of different ways that you can leverage this push template using just static text and inline, markdown formatting, however you want to set that up. So there's quite a lot to take in here. I know we are running a little bit over time here, so I'm sorry for keeping everybody. We're going to go ahead and end it there. I know we didn't have too much time to get into Q&A. I hope my other team members were able to help out inside of the questions in here. But if you do have any other questions, definitely feel free to reach out to us via email at contact@gurock.com. You can also reach out to us in our user forums. There's all kinds of ways that you can talk to us here. We do appreciate you joining today. Again, my name is Jacob Scott. I want to thank you all for being here. As I mentioned earlier, we did record this webinar. A link to the recording will be sent to all registered attendees, so you can share this with your team or go back later for reference if there's something else you want to review. If you have any questions, suggestions, feedback, or other topics you'd like to see covered in future webinars, again, just reach out to us at contact@gurock.com or in our user forums, and we'd love to hear from you. So thank you very much again for joining, everybody. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your day.